Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Greenbelt at Home, our virtual series. And this month, we're going to introduce you to our new bi-monthly series known as Greenbelt Education History, where we will walk and talk with some former Greenbelt environmental educators that have helped to shape the Greenbelt and its education department into what it is today. So it's with great honor to introduce our first guest, Howard Fischer, who was a Greenbelt environmental educator back when the Greenbelt was being managed by the Staten Island Institute for Arts and Science.
Correct.
And I believe you were working here from 1979 to about 85.
October 85.
Awesome, yeah. Excellent. So thank you again for joining us here.
You're very welcome.
As we're working through a world with the pandemic and going virtual, this is a new platform that we've been able to use. So we're excited to have you join us for this. So feel free to wave at everyone at home and say hi.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. So here we are at the Stone House up at High Rock Park, which is currently the Greenbelt Conservancy administrative building. But from what I've heard from you in the past, whether we were here at High Rock or when we've met at like HURT meetings and different organizations and events around Staten Island, that you actually lived here.
Yeah, I lived here for 5 years.
For 5 years.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. And what was your position at that time?
I was a naturalist. At that point, I was a naturalist. I actually started off in the gift shop. Through the institute, I did bird walks, and then I met people, and they said, well, why don't would you like a weekend job? And then, that's how it all began.
Excellent.
So from that weekend job, just, manning the visitor center, it evolved into being hired as a naturalist.
Awesome. That's so exciting to think that, any of us who are interested in nature, the environment, we can start in a position like working at a gift shop. I know I started at Snug Harbor in the gift shop in cottage number 5, and it eventually led me to a place where I can teach environmental education. So everyone at home, if you have a dream and something you want to do, don't be afraid to follow that dream, right? And to take whatever opportunity you can get along the way. Awesome. So you lived here in the Stone House, which is super awesome.
It was great. It was like having your own estate. The only option, the one downside was not having hot water. And that was an ongoing joke. That, it was just the plumbing and the situation in the building. But it was great living here. Right. I did a lot of birding, and I had bird walks on the weekends, but it was just it was so peaceful, and so from 80, I guess from around Thanksgiving of 80 through October of 85, I lived here. Actually, the day I moved, there was an earthquake, a 3.4 earthquake, right in this area.
Right in this region? Yeah. Wow.
So that was my memory of leaving the place.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So as environmental educators today, I wake up at home, I drive into work, I come up the road after driving up Nevada Avenue. What was it like in a day in the life of an educator back in 1980 to 84? What did a regular day look like from when you got up to when you were done with work?
Okay. So I would get up, and the staff, I had to be ready before they all came in. So I'd make my coffee, and sometimes they'd steal my coffee. But that was an ongoing joke too. But so late September through December, we actually did a program here. So, we'd meet a bus in the parking lot, and then we'd have a class. So each of us would have a class. Actually, we had 2 classes. So one began at, I'm assuming around 9:30. Normally local Staten Island schools came first, and then the other borough schools came later. So we had two classes weekly, daily, for the week. And then in the winter, we would actually take a program into public schools.
Oh, very cool.
So we had shopping bags, carousel projectors, whatever we needed. And then we would go into the schools with different programs. We did a Native American program. We did, winter adaptations, birds, botany. We had a number of themes. We changed them. We had meetings. There were a number of naturalists. So we changed themes. And the same thing for the visitation.
Great. Excellent.
Yeah.
So that's awesome to see that those themes related to environmental education are still used today. We've changed some models, and we've changed some theories and some academics and standards, but overall, at the core of what we do today, is exactly what
Yeah.
you were doing in the 80s and folks were doing in the 70s and the 60s. So it's really great to see how enduring and resilient that form of education is.
Well, even back then, it was more of a discovery-based environmental teaching.
Right.
We didn't just go and say this, and this. You know, we would go out on the trails. Actually, there were three guides. So the naturalist had a group, and then there were two guides who assisted. So we would divide the class into thirds, and then we would come back and then more or less summarize what we found and share.
Cool.
But it wasn't a name this plant, name that animal. It was a more inquiry based lesson, which obviously is what we're doing now. That's kind of the basis for our teaching now.
Completely.
So, yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
And you said your classroom was right over here, right?
Yeah.
So maybe we could take a walk over
Sure.
there.
Each of the three naturalists had a classroom. So my classroom was the Gypsy Lab.
So in the Gypsy Lab, for those of you who are joining us, is not this first smaller building to the left of the stone house, but the one after it. But this was called Pouch? Or what was the name for this building?
This was Pouch Lab. Nancy Slovic had this one, and then Olivia Hansen had Roosevelt Lab. And then they also had a program in Roosevelt Lab. They had naturalists come from schools. I guess they were interns, and they stayed in the Roosevelt Lab as well. This was the Pouch Lab, and then naturalists had this building, and then I had the last lab.
So you would meet the folks. Where were they parked at the time?
That could be an issue because if there's more parking lot, the school buses would come in, they would drop the classes off, and then we would just pick the kids up and then walk the classes up the hill. So so as I said, the Staten Island schools, as a rule, came. We had more Staten Island classes than the other boroughs, but we had quite a few. We had schools from Brooklyn, the Bronx, occasionally a Manhattan school, but we had classes from all five boroughs.
That's really exciting.
Yeah, it was, and we had yeshivas and the local parochial schools would come up as well. But there was a secretary in the building who would book all the classes. And then we would get a sheet, and then we get name tags. And it was a really pleasant way of teaching kids the outdoor. We'd go out, as I said, we'd go out and just walk in the forest. Maybe 40 minutes in the forest, and then we'd come back and then have a discussion.
Excellent. Did you have a favorite class that you teach? I know you are big into birding, and you run a lot of birding programs.
When there were birds, obviously I would. But we actually stuck with the theme. So if it was Native American studies, we would look at plants and focus on what the Native Americans ate. Right. What plants they utilized. If it was botany, obviously it was the trees, and not identification so much, but just why it's why certain species are living, actually growing where they are, so a theme like that.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And were there specific routes you would take, like with the lavender, loosestrife swamp?
Yeah, there was a loosestrife swamp trail. Oh yeah. So we'd occasionally meet up with each other, and that was it was never an issue. But sometimes if one group was stopped, you had to go around the group. That was the only I guess that was the only little minor problem we had.
Totally.
I guess like a little traffic jam on the trails.
Yeah, and we still experience that to this day. We'll have two classes overlapping, and we try to have one come up to a classroom and one do the hike. But sometimes, learning goes a little quicker and you're transitioning quicker. So we definitely know that experience. And even with technology now, we have all kinds of different hiccups with trying to do programs via Facebook Live and Zoom. But audiences are always forgiven, right? Students,
absolutely.
Totally. As educators, we worry about that transition, or I mispronounced that word, or I stumbled. But the truth is, students are just excited to be out here, right?
They really, I don't think I ever had a negative experience. The only The only thing I remember so fondly, though, is that the kids were terrified, and you had to convince them there's nothing dangerous about the forest, and one, kids from the inner city, and that was rewarding. Once they, left and said, "Wow, it's not bad. It's not this. It's."
Yeah.
So that was really good. And then we had kids ranging in age from kindergarten through high school. I really liked the high school classes because you could really communicate with them, and some of them were doing studies. And,
Right, you can get into a little more of the meat and
occasionally
bones of what.
Noodle High School, some of the parochial high schools, Staten Island Academy, occasionally,
Right.
but they had their own, people who did programs. So
Very cool.
so it ranged, all grades.
So it looks a little bit different now, but I believe there are more gardens
This
here, right?
This over here was the sensory garden. So I mean, despite the fact that there were trees, that they tried to grow some, herbs, very fragrant herbs, and they had mints, and they didn't do as well, given the fact that there's not enough sun. If you're growing that type of plant, you really need full sun. But this was they called this the sensory garden over here.
Very cool. So there's a sensory garden, and then there's the remnants of the rhododendrons that are over there.
That was actually, that garden was designed in memory of a person who worked here at one time. So I think that was under Paulo. Right. So when I started here, we were with the Staten Island Institute of Arts and Sciences. So I was actually hired by the museum.
Yes.
It was either the museum that that was the shortened version of identifying who hired us,
right,
and paid us. And then it was the Staten Island Institute of Arts and Sciences.
Right. And they, I believe, funded the program from the 60s up until like 1989?
I believe early 70s, because this was a Girl Scout camp.
Yes.
Our was a Girl Scout camp. And so, from the 70s, that was Harry Beekford. There were some really, let's say, some very good programs going on. There were people here who were, I would say they were pioneers in the environmental field.
Excellent.
So Harry Beekford, and then there's another gentleman, I can't remember his name now. I know Dick Bugler was very, very involved. So
right, and I read that during the establishment, the education program itself being nationally recognized as a landmark status. In 1971, folks like Ed Sharp and like the grandfathers of environmental education actually came here to assist in setting that foundation.
There's one name that escapes me now, but he was actually instrumental in getting this place recognized as a top environmental, park.
Yeah.
And then through the 70s and then 80s, but it was an interesting situation. The museum did the programs, so they administered the buildings. The Parks Department took care of the maintenance. So technically, it was owned by Parks, but the education program was administered by the museum.
Right. So, and that's even though to this day, Greenbelt Education Department or park staff working in partnership with the Greenbelt Conservancy to deliver these programs. There's been transitions over the years, but that core of education has outlasted all of it, right?
That's all that matters.
No matter who's hosting it, as long as we're getting young people, adults, people from all walks of life here to experience this amazing landscape and the important values of environmental education.
Absolutely.
So thinking about today, you're still active in environmental education, whether it's with protectors or Friends of Blue Heron. What do you see as like the biggest challenges today for environmental education, given, our climate crisis, given social injustices, access to, resources?
Well, I think just being exposed to nature, I think that's the most important thing. If I do bird walks, people, I focus, my major interest is birding, birds in general.
Yes.
So, I guess you could call me an amateur ornithologist, but just bringing people out. But once you are exposed to one aspect of the environment, it just leads into others. So if you like snakes and amphibians, you're obviously going to become a botanist in a sense, because then you learn about the habitats, and
Yes.
you see the habitats, and it just expands.
Mhm.
So in other words, it's a growing.
Absolutely.
It's a growing interest.
Right. You have to start somewhere, right?
So you start somewhere, and as I said, I started with birds, and then from there it went to trees, and I was actually put in place by people who said, "What tree?" And these were the old naturalists at the museum who I got fond memories of.
Yeah. It's really excellent and exciting. Yeah. As someone who's seen this park change over the years, you were here in late '70s into the '80s, and things have transformed. Agencies have shifted. What can we, as environmental educators, the Greenbelt Conservancy parks, do better, in your opinion, to protect this space?
Well, just keep it as natural as it was. I mean, I see. I mean, the buildings are okay, but I just, as in terms of just preventing litter and maybe some maintenance. I mean, there are trails that need a little more tender loving care. I mean, there were wood duck boxes, they're just falling apart.
Right.
In other words, just when you go to a building and you see lumber all around, I think that just needs to be rectified.
Totally.
Because people see that, and you just want it as natural and as neat.
Yes.
As far look, there are buildings, and you have you have maintenance, but just keep it a little neater. That's the only suggestion that I have. But the parking lot is fine. I mean, the trails are well maintained. I mean, the trees. I mean, everything is really. I mean, it's. And I can even recognize trees, that I knew 35 years ago.
Right.
So.
Yeah. No, that's totally true. And there's ongoing stewardship projects, and there's we're always open to feedback to improve these parks because they belong to all of us. They're our classroom, and they're a space that we get to work. But like you said, we have to clean up our workspace because it belongs to everybody. It's a cooperative, collaborative, shared world. And education is the tool to teach people that, right?
But I'd like to add one thing too. I mean, if you reached out to adults, and had like wildflower themes, or like planting of wildflower garden, native gardens, and just reached out, I think that would be really good.
Great. Yeah.
I think you would get it. I think people would be interested in that.
Yeah, definitely. And we,
more adult outdoor education classes to weekend. So I mean, that's only a wish of mine.
Totally. Yeah. It's we spend a lot of time trying to teach young people so that as they become adults, they become
that's what it should
stewards and environmental warriors in a lot of ways. But we can do it the opposite way too. By teaching adults, they're going to share that with children. So I know here we try to provide the most amount of diverse programming possible. But yeah, I think that there's kind of a stereotype thought that environmental education is only designed for children, and so adults are sometimes I don't want to go to that because it's going to be full of kids. But that's not always the case, right?
Exactly. That's what I was kind of
so
implying.
Right. So adults at home, you are always welcome to all of our Greenbelt programs here, and I know you have a couple upcoming programs as well in different parts of the island now.
I've been actually doing bird walks on Staten Island. I lead bird walks for them. Actually, I started with the Staten Island Institute, the museum, and then protectors. But most of them are now with the Friends of Blue Heron Park. So I do 2 a month.
Excellent.
Yeah. So with the exception of summer, there are 2 a month.
Right.
COVID has really had some negative effects on getting people out. I mean, it's all but stopped. Outdoor bird walks, but we're getting back.
Yeah,
they're coming back.
I think each of us, one program at a time until we can get there and make sure everyone's safe. Where can folks look up those programs?
If they go to the Friends of Blue Heron website, they will have all the bird walks there. A short description of the bird walks, where we go. I know in February I'm going to Great Kills and Fort Wadsworth. And then in March, we'll be at Mount Loretto and Clover Lakes Park. I don't have the date. I know the last day of March, I'll be at Clover Lakes Park. And all the walks are on a Sunday. We begin at 9 a.m. and we end at 11:30. I don't rush. And then in the spring, rarely we're out at 8 o'clock. the earlier walks are not as popular. So 9 o'clock is a safe time.
So folks gotta get up early, eat their oatmeal or their eggs, and they can come out and go birding with
and
all of you.
They're on Sunday.
They're on Sunday. So it's nice.
Over the years, I've found that Sundays are better than Saturdays. People shop and do things on Saturdays. But we meet in a locality. Everyone needs a pair of binoculars, obviously, and then we go out for 2 hours and bird.
Excellent. Very good. Well, I want to thank you for joining us for this Greenbelt Education Facebook Live, for not just joining us, for all the work you've done that allows us to have a really solid foundation here at the Greenbelt for our educational programs. And we wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for folks like you advocating.
You keep up the good work.
So awesome.
Pleasure.
So thank you at home for joining us. If you're interested in more Greenbelt at Home virtual content, you can visit our events calendar at sigreenbelt.org, or you can go to our YouTube channel, the Staten Island Greenbelt. We hope to see you soon. Have a safe and happy new year.
Thank you.